Well, last night we had the opportunity to sit down with Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus to discuss the state of the war after more than 40 days and what the IDF's objectives are in light of the truce developments. Let's take a look at what he had to say about the IDF's conduct, long-term strategy, and the pause in fighting. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for joining us during this busy and difficult time. Let's start things off with a question about the main objective of this operation. Now that the IDF has effectively conquered northern Gaza, do they plan to continue into southern Gaza?
46 days to be exact, and we continue to operate and to dismantle Hamas. That is our aim. We have been making good, steady, methodical progress so far in northern Gaza. I think we've been engaged with and taken out of action between 11 to 12 of the 12 Hamas battalions in northern Gaza, which is good progress. Not all of them are out of commission yet, but their main fighting capabilities have been significantly affected by our activity, which is good, but there's still the other half, another 12 Hamas battalions that are in southern Gaza, central and southern Gaza. And of course, I think everybody understands that in order to prevent a second October 7th, and in order to prevent another terror attack from Gaza, we have to make sure that we take out all of Hamas capabilities, and that is what the IDF intends to do.
So if the IDF is continuing to hunt down Hamas terrorists in southern Gaza, what protections will be provided for Palestinian civilians, especially given the fact that nearly 1 million of them have fled from the north to the south?
Yeah, the human situation in southern Gaza is important. We need to make sure that we fight the enemy, Hamas, and not the civilian population. They aren't our enemy, and we will continue to take steps in order to keep them as much as possible, as much as feasible in this war that we find ourselves out of harm's way. We'll find solutions, whether it will be the humanitarian area in the Muassi or other solutions that will allow us to operate against the enemy, where the enemy is embedded underneath the civilian facilities and the civilian population, essentially Rafah and Khan Yunis. That is where they are, and that is where we will go after them. And we will find ways in order to keep civilians out of harm's way, just as we did in northern Gaza. We took civilians, we adapted our pace of operations and the scope and the intensity and the weapons that we used to make sure that first and foremost civilians got out. Most of them have gotten out, and as we will continue operations, we will find solutions for that as well.
Now, one of the primary criticisms of the IDF in this operation has been the disproportionately high casualty numbers coming from Palestinian sources. Why is that number so high? And what is the IDF doing in order to protect Palestinian civilian lives and differentiate between civilians and combatants?
Yeah, so I think those numbers issued by the Hamas-controlled entities in Gaza are, simply put, false. They are exaggerated numbers of women, children, and the elderly. The biggest age group, the part of the demographic of Gaza that you see heavily underrepresented in the Palestinian figures, are men at the age of 17 to 35, which is combat age of men. They're not there. And it doesn't compute with the general population of Gaza. Men are at least 49 or 50% of the population, yet there are very little to be found in the list of casualties. That doesn't compute. And I think that what the Palestinians are trying to do, what Hamas is trying to do, is to inflate the amount of civilians killed and deflate and hide the amount of combatants killed. Not the first time that Hamas tried to do this. What we are busy doing is fact-checking and referencing dead terrorists that we are aware of, and then comparing that to the list of names and numbers that Hamas has given out, finding the discrepancies, and then we will be showing that to the world, and again exposing another lie of how Hamas manipulates information, how they lie and try to deceive. The sad thing is that so many organizations and even decision makers around the world take these numbers at face value as if they are true, without putting them into proper context of these are numbers and figures that have been disseminated by a terror organization. These are people that lie, deceit, and kill and murder for a living. and they don't have any issues about it. So why trust the data that they give? And I think it's very sad that UN institutions, international governments around the world are taking it at face value. That needs to change, and there needs to be a lot of skepticism regarding anything that is handed out by Hamas in Gaza.
Let's speak about the potential truce that's taking place. Does this truce, this ceasefire, endanger the IDF's ability to destroy Hamas in the Gaza Strip?
At the end of the day, I think it's clear for everybody, from Washington through the capitals of Europe, and it's definitely clear in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, that this war cannot end with Hamas standing, with Hamas having combat capabilities and the ability to launch another attack like October the 7th. Ghazi Hamed, a senior Hamas official, said that we will do October 7 again and again and again and again. And I think that we should listen, and I think that Israeli decision makers are aware and need to be very careful and understanding of the fact that if we leave them the chance and the actual tools on the ground to rebuild, rearm, and plan another attack against Israel, that is what they'll do. And therefore, I think that we have no other choice but to, of course, facilitate the safe repatriation of these Israeli hostages, have them return home to their loved ones, which will be great and a moment of joy for those families, but then continue fighting until we dismantle Hamas. There's no contradiction between the two. There can be a local tactical pause of operations and then resume operations with great force and severity against Hamas.
Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Emily.